Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for the introduction. I don't see myself as Sheikh at all. I'm just someone who is enjoying the journey in this life, trying to explore and understand Islam and my mission in this world. So when the brothers asked me to talk today, I thought that I would talk about the sociology of Islam and Islamic sociology. And I think that when we start with Islamic sociology, or how we understand the human condition, as we call it in sociology, and the nature of human beings and their position in this world, their mission, the human nature in its all different aspects, psychological, sociological, political, economic, etc. We usually go into the different disciplines. And these disciplines decide the scope of the study and decide the methods that we are using. And of course, they have been established on secular basis. The encyclopedic sort of alim that we used to have in previous centuries is very difficult to train now. As much as we can, we try to bridge the gap between Islamic studies and religious studies and social sciences on the other hand, and sometimes even natural sciences. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult. On one hand, because the training is very much limited to the discipline, and on the other hand, the disciplines as they are on the map of social and sciences, and then the division between social sciences and religious sciences, as I mentioned, and natural sciences as well. But also because there is this limitation that we have on our understanding, and then we have all these attempts to sort of decolonialize social sciences because we were affected by the West, etc. But decolonization does not necessarily mean what has been called Islamization. So Islamization can be seen as part of the wider map of decolonization, though actually each is studied differently. But I think that decolonization is from our Islamic perspective, lacks this focus on a new perspective that can be provided by Islamic faith and by Islamic worldview. And I have been usually, usually when I'm invited to talk, I share what I am interested in at the very moment, and this is how I choose my title. So I'm not usually very accommodating of the titles that are given to me. So I chose this title myself because I'm interested in that. I have been trained as a political scientist and political theorist, basically. But I have always been trying to go back to the Quran and Sunnah and try to understand how we can understand the world. Of course, I was blessed to be of the generation that once upon graduation, I was part of the efforts and to reconsider different aspects of social theory and social sciences at the IIIT, the International Institute of Islamic Thought in the US. And at that time, I was part of a big project that they launched in 1988-89 on international relations in Islam. And it was like multi-volume work that lasted for almost 10 years. And with the 30 plus researchers and many people who sort of joined at one point or another. And this was a very good training, and it was very liberating for my generation, actually, at that time, when actually our professors were very much frowning at what we are doing. And we were supported by some other professors and who trained us and helped us, etc. And many of my generation at the time tried to attend halakas of different scholars of Al-Azhar to be able to sort of grasp the methodology of looking at the Quran and Sunnah and how to actually understand it from our quote-unquote sociological perspective. So we had these debates all the time with different shuyukh on what we are doing and where can we find something that is similar to that or helping us to understand the questions and the problems that we are addressing in the Quran and Sunnah or in the Turath, in the heritage of the Salaf in different disciplines and different fields of life. I think that at that moment, this is a very short story where I come from. At that moment, I started realizing that I need to work between the different disciplines. And my master's was on women and politics in Islam, but it was also going back to study the Sirah and Sunnah of the Prophet, and of course the Quran, and then going and deconstructing in a way, or looking very critically at feminist theories that were available at the moment that later on developed far further. For my PhD, I chose to work on the notion of citizenship in liberal thought, because I thought that these two issues, women and minorities and citizenship, are topics that we are facing all the time. But this is not the issue. The issue that during this journey, I realized that our understanding of sociology is very much curbed by the secular perspective. And to some extent, when we were trying to break with that, or try to be more critical of it, we actually try to use the same spaces and the same concepts and try to find opposite concepts or relevant concepts in the Quran and Sunnah. And I think that we have to go outside this. Of course, Ismail Farouqi and also Naqib al-Attas, Sayyid Naqib al-Attas, both of them were looking at the aspect of Tawheed, how Tawheed affects very much our understanding of the world, and how it can be introduced to philosophy and to social sciences. Sayyid Naqib al-Attas started earlier than al-Farouqi, but it was interesting how they looked at secularism as a challenge and the importance of reintroducing the notion or bringing back the notions of Tawheed in. When I was trying to figure out how to sort of think about the sociology of Islam, I'm sorry, the Islamic sociology, how Islam sees the human condition and the human world and its conditions, its sunan, and the nature of humans, the fitra, the different aspects through which Sharia organizes their social and personal, as well as political and economic life, as well as international relations. I was trying to understand what are the sources. Should we go and pick from the Quran the dimensions that talk, for example, about al-insan? This is something that has been done by, for example, Itsusu, one of the prominent, I can't say Orientalist. Actually, he's a scholar from Japan who actually has a very interesting book about Allah and insan, God and man, in the Quran, and this perspective is foundational for us to try to understand not only how humans act amongst themselves, or the homo sociologicus, as we call it, but also the homo religiosus. Sort of, if we start with a sociology that is based on Islam, in Islamic sociology, a way we look at social life from an Islamic perspective, then this would necessitate that we go back to the book and see the notion of divinity, the notion of Tawheed, the notion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then we move to the notions of al-nubuwat. So we go through al-qasas. Usually when we study sociology, we go to the notions that are related to social interactions in the Quran, for example, and try to see the relation between the mu'mineen, al-ukhuwa, for example, or we go to the family structure, or we go to the bond of Islam in terms of its social implications, and then we go to the notions of establishing Sharia and guarding Sharia, etc., and up to jihad, for example. These are different levels of peaceful, pacifist, civil, and also more sort of war or quote unquote use of force with its different level. But then we can also go, if we want to develop an Islamic sociology, we can go to the qasas in the Quran. We can see the different cycles, rise and fall of different sort of societies, and what social change, which is a very important aspect of sociology, what social change, how social change happens, and how social change is related sometimes to the economic dimension, how people basically interacted in the economic sphere in a way that was not abiding by the rules Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to them. Or we are talking about sexual and social relations that led to punishment for different social groups and societies. Or we are talking about the notion of Tawheed itself and how it was so essential. I was just yesterday giving a lecture to my students on Greek thought and mythology, and I explained to them how actually the notion of asnam, the notion of idols, is very much rooted in human nature, and we should understand that. We assume that because of the fitra, human nature is more prone to go towards religion. But actually, there is a very strong component of materiality in it, and there is a material tendency, inclination to touch and to see the transcendental, to bring it closer. And you'll find that in the Quran, in the two stories of Musa alayhi salam, when he said, Rabbi arini anzur ilayk, he wanted to see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he was told that this is impossible. And also the story of Prophet Ibrahim, when he said, Rabbi arini kayfa tuhil mawta, he wanted to understand the question of death and resurrection. So this dimension, for example, is very important, how then it transforms into different practices in society, veganism, the shift towards bid'ah in terms of going back through different forms of popular religiosity and common practices towards this sort of materialistic aspect of the practice of faith in going to shrines and other things. I'm not going into the fiqh debate here. I'm talking more about the anthropology of it. So I think that in the Quran, in different aspects of the Quran, if we look at the Quran, when we are starting with Tawheed and then going to the nature of the human self, how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about al-insan or al-nas or ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, how faith changes people, and then Bani Adam, he's categorizing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is categorizing, and then he goes into the ahkam, so do and do not do, so forbidding and ordering, and then we have al-qasas, and then we have al-akhlaq, we have the ethics, and then we have also the akhirah. And I think that this is one of the dimensions, for example, that in sociology of Islam, in the study of sociology of Islam, not in Islamic sociology, that we are trying to grasp, and that is very dynamic through our understanding as well. I mean, one generation comes after the other and tries to explore not our generations, but starting from the early centuries of Islam. This is the thing that is usually absent, is basically al-akhirah, the day of judgment, and how it affects people's sort of actions, moral behavior, their understanding of their mission in this world, or the absence of thereof. So then we can look into other things. Where can we look in? What can we look? What concepts are we looking for in the Quran? We are looking for the concepts of. I try to put them in a series of sort of notions that end up with alif nun in the Arabic language. So we're talking about ad-dayyan. So the Quran talks about different types of imagination of the divine or the history of God, as we call it in our days now. And then it talks about the universe, and hence there is a wisdom of trying to understand the cosmos, the nomos. So there are other creatures in this creation, and human beings have a specific role and status in it. And then we have all these akwan. So we have ad-dayyan, Allah, and then we have al-akwan. They include also what is transcendental. So al-malaika, al-shaytan, al-jan, all these creations are also part of that wider world, and we have our relations with them that are very interesting. They do not come into the understanding of sociology in modern terms, but they are actually part of the individual's understanding. And once you relate to that world that you cannot see, you can actually change the civic virtues, and then you can be motivated towards a more ethical society. We're not that society that would be called in a secular perspective, as was called by one of the modern thinkers, a moral man in an immoral society. No, this is not how we do it. We want a moral man or a moral human and a moral society as well. And then we understand that these moral societies will not necessarily be idealistic or so. So how to deal with the issues of conflict, the issues of war, the issues of violence, the issues of dissent, contestation, revolution, and other aspects as well. And then the third dimension that we find that is very important as a starting point or a frame for our understanding of Islamic sociology is the notion of mizan. And I think that the notion of mizan is not only the mizan in terms of law or sharia or morality and also the mizan of sunnah, for example, but also the mizan in terms of the wider norms again. So how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created in this cosmos a specific mizan. And there has been recently very interesting attempts to understand the notion of natural law in Islam compared to natural laws notion in Christianity and Judaism. A notion that maybe because there was a focus on Sharia and Islamic law and ethics, we somehow thought that there is no theory for natural law in Islam. But recently there has been a very interesting academic work done on that. And then the fourth dimension after Ad-Dayan, Al-Akwan, and Al-Mizan is basically Al-Insan. And the human condition or the human self is so multidimensional, and we find in the Quran the different aspects that deal with it, the aspects of the religious or the spiritual, and they can be distinguished from each other, but the dimension of believing in the transcendental and in the metaphysical. And then we have the aspect of the physicality, the body, how it's regulated in its relation to other human bodies, space and body, body and sexuality issues, of course, body and the difference between men and women, ethnicity, and many other things. You will find them addressed in the Quran and in the Sunnah clearly, and you have to extract from that sort of a frame for your understanding of the human condition. And of course comes with that language, al-lisan, and comes with that rationality and reason, and how we understand rushd, how we understand our definition of rationality from an Islamic perspective. And all these dimensions are actually in detail in the Quran. So we can start building this sort of architectonic vision from the Quran. And then we have az-zaman and al-makan. So we have time, notions of time, either it is about history or it is about the wider circles of time, the time in the divine. إن يوما عند ربك بألف سنة مما تعدون تعرج الملائكة في يوم كان مقداره 50,000 سنة. So we have different levels of time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about in relation to our understanding of time that is very much affected by our position as Earth in this universe. So, and these multi-layers actually are very much manifested, and I will talk about that a bit later, manifested in the Sharia itself and in the ibadah, in the practices of Islam, in different rituals of the faith itself. And this is actually very important. And then we have the notions that are mentioned in the Quran, whether it is al-fitra or as-sunan generally. When it comes to, and we have also lessons of history and change. When we come to Prophet Muhammad, Sunnah and Seerah, there are so many aspects in it that can be very much compared to modern understandings of sociology, but from a completely different perspective. So again, the aspects of the human self, the nature of the relation between the human and his society, different types of societies, social interactions and economic interactions, and historical sociology. We're talking about equality, values, the freedom, dignity, etc. So all of these aspects are mentioned and manifested actually in the Nubuwah. And this is what Nubuwah is about. I mean, different Islamic writers and thinkers and sheikhs and ulama, etc. Talked a lot about how a Nubuwah is not just about the instance, it's about the example, it's about the uswa, and why prophethood is so important in our understanding of its nature and also its limitations. Prophet Muhammad was ordered to say in the Quran, "Qul subhana rabbi hal kuntu illa basharan rasula." So we don't go to the level of turning the prophet into a divine nature, something that the Jews actually with Uzair, when they said Uzair ibn Allah, or the Christians when they said Isa ibn Allah, we don't go to that level. And we also don't consider Prophet Muhammad or the prophets generally to be just humans like everyone else. They have this mission of carrying the wahi, of the revelation. And hence there is something not only spiritual, but also physical. Yani when you see the description of Sayyidah Aisha, when Prophet Muhammad used to have the revelation, and how his even physical nature used to be very much affected by that. So nubuwwah is something extremely important. And when we look at as-sira and as-sunnah, we find different dimensions of nature of social change. And I always give the example of women, when not because I'm only restricted to issues of women, but because it's a very interesting example. When in the Bukhari we have this hadith of Umar ibn al-Khattab, when he says, "كُنَّا لَا نُعِدُّ النِّسَاءَ شَيْئًا," we did not consider women to be something important. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered what he ordered, so we gave them the rights without allowing them to participate in public affairs. Yeah, this is more or less the translation. And then when we were people who would overcome the women. This is the literal translation. It means like men were more powerful than women in the society and in the public sphere. And then when we migrated to Medina, we found that in Medina, men have a strong say or a strong sort of presence, and our women started taking from the habits of the women of Medina. And this is interesting. If you start tracking different hadiths from that perspective in the Bukhari and Muslim and the authentic book of hadith, you'll find loads of hadith that actually describe bits and pieces, different aspects of the social relations and the social change that took place during the life of Prophet Muhammad, whether between different classes, between whites and white men and black men, men of high tribes and men of and slaves, between different religions. And then you can extract from that some sort of visions regarding how to manage different aspects. And I also will mention the relation between the different religions again. But where do we, and this is the most important question, where do we find these theories in Islamic books? So it was interesting for me to actually, of course, we know you can go through all the heritage of Islam and then find them in the books of Tazkiyah, starting from early writings. يعني I usually teach Mawardi's Adab al-Dunya, Adab al-Dini wa Dunya. It was called Adab al-Dunya wa Din, and then some people wanted to shift it to Adab al-Dini wa Dunya. And in that, he actually relates between the moral, the sociological, and the political. So early, there was that interest in trying to see the sociological dynamics of any society at the time, and how Sharia actually regulates, and what is the logic behind this regulation. But I also found very interesting books. One of the books that I started looking into, and I'm very interested in, this deserves a lecture on its own, is the book of Shaykh Waliullah al-Dahlawi, Hujjatullah al-Baqi. And this book is actually extremely interesting, like another book, which is Al-Raghib al-Asfahani's book, Al-Dhari'a ila Makarim al-Sharia. Both books actually try to, Shah Waliullah al-Dahlawi was actually in the 18th century, but Raghib Asfahani was died in the 6th century. So between both of them, there are so many centuries with a lot of books as well. You can find that in Kutub al-Fiqh, you can find that in Kutub, in the books of Tazkiyah, you can find that in also the books of Fiqh itself, when they are trying to explain some aspects of Sharia and Ahkam, and then they try to find the sort of al-Dalil, and then al-Manat, and then they talk about the wisdom of this and that. You'll find how they are trying to imagine society, because there is no hukm that is in fiqh mentioned in the books of fiqh without an imagination of the wider picture, etc. And this is how their minds usually at that time they used to function. So Al-Raghib al-Asfahani, when he talked about al-Dhari'a ila Makarim al-Sharia, he wanted to actually see what is behind the Sharia, the Shar'i hukm, the Shar'i the regulation, what is behind them, what is at the back of it, what are we talking about and why. And Shah Waliullah al-Dahlawi as well in Hujjatullah al-Baligha he tried to do the same. And these two books are actually very interesting because based on what I mentioned regarding how Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, for example, regulated the relation between different religious communities. So we're talking about a multi-faith community in Medina, for example, and then in the following historical eras. But he talked about something that he called السياسات الملية. And of course, we have Ash-Shahristani's Al-Milal wal-Nihal, trying to figure out how different groups split into other groups and more diversification in the understanding of the notion of millah, for example. Till we have the millite system in the Ottoman Empire. So all of that is actually related to issues that we study in modern sociology, related to cleavages, to conflicts, to social dynamics, and even some of them talked about the different the wisdom of different aspects of Sharia in the five pillars. Why there is a need for this tawheed and aqidah in society, and then what is the mission of Salah, the wisdom of having a prayer practiced in this manner collectively, and then a whole bulk on az-zakah. You know, Sheikh Qaradawi, rahmahullah, passed away a few weeks ago, and he had this big book on he has two major books that were multi-volumes, yani, but the most important ones are the ones on zakat and jihad. Jihad was more later in his life that he wrote. So they look at all of that, not from the practical aspect, but from the aspects of wisdom. And hence, we try to find social law based on that. And these books are actually very interesting to look into. In our modern times, and of course, these are just two examples across two different time frames, but I found actually very interesting sociologists that I recently knew of, and maybe I'm the one who was ignorant, but who is, before I mentioned Ali Shariati, who was very interested in the Quranic approach to sociology, or sociology in the Quran, or Quranic sociology, as he called it. And then in another book, he used to compare it between different types of paradigms, if we can say so. And he was a Pakistani scholar, and his name was Basharat Ali. And it was very difficult to find his books online, and I had to ask friends in the US to get them from the Library of Congress. And he's very interesting because he is not trying to preach an Islamic sociology. He's literally comparing the different notions and the methodologies and the concepts of modern sociology with what he found in the Quran according to his own reading. And I think that there should be more light shed on the works of Basharat Ali, because it's very interesting, can then relate to the work of Sayyid Naqib al-Attas and the work of Ali Shariati in a great manner, can relate to the work of Faruqi if we look at it from the perspective that he introduced in his work on sociology of Islam. What can we do with this knowledge if we try to develop it further? And I had also thought about how we can introduce some of our Islamic perspectives into the postmodern understanding of social life. Last year, we had at Ibn Haldun University in Istanbul a workshop for a seminar that was titled Artificial Intelligence and Posthumanism. And it was very interesting to see how between the beast and the man, as Ibn Khaldun mentioned, yani, human civilizations and human history is basically, there is a pendule between التوحش والتأنس, between savagery and civility, in a way, if we can use these words. Between the التوحش والتأنس, there is a huge space that we need to look into, and sometimes it was in some literatures called the beast and the man, how the human beings can be tamed, as Freud said, civilizations is built on controlling the pleasures of man and trying to control his instincts and desires. But also when we look at our understanding of the human, it's very much affected by ideology as well. it's very much affected by technology as well. So ideology, technology, and I can add also utopia, were things that came later in the understanding of the realm of ideas, because we didn't call different mazhab ideologies, we didn't call different milal and nihal ideologies. Ideologies are basically a production of the modern paradigm, in a way, how some ideas are almost like inclusive religions, and then how they develop a vision of the hereafter by negating it or accepting it or marginalizing it, how they introduce a theory about economics and human relations, the notion of gratification, that it's not delayed, but it's instant, etc. So you can compare the different visions of Islamic sociology with what we have in ideology, but also utopia, and then technology. Habermas has got this very interesting piece that he wrote, that technology can also become ideology, and this was in the modern era, when there was that over obsession with the development in sciences, etc. So it became in itself almost like a deen, that this is what will guide us, and this is what is going to take us to the Jannah on this earth, in a way. Of course, COVID made many philosophers and thinkers revise that perspective. But I think that the aspect of technology is one of the dimensions that we need to include in our perspective and see how we can deal with it, because it's fairly new. And there are some difficulties in allowing or inviting the religious discourse in talking about the robotics, for example, and what our relations to robotics will be. So all these ahkam, we faced that when we started. I was one of those who were part of establishing a website. 1999, it was called Islam Online, and then it lasted for only 10 years and then was closed. It was one of the biggest Islamic websites online by Arabic, and then we also had an English section. And we faced these difficulties, how this will affect actually the practice of religion and the different patterns of dealing with fatwa, for example. And of course, this developed later with social media and with the smartphone, and how people can access different sheikhs and different websites of fatwa. And sometimes these websites are like very extremely fishy for me. Yani, you have this website or application called Ask. You just go and ask someone, and there is very little mentioned about the training of the person or who this person is. And sometimes the funnier the sheikh is, the more followers he has. So we go into this realm of liquidity, in a way. All of that will affect not only the understanding of the world, but also the practice of faith itself. And hence, Islamic sociology is not only about the theory, but it's also about the changes that take place and how we can basically try to make them more mustaqim, more straightened by our understanding of al-wahy wal-sunnah. I think also that one of the issues that need to be addressed, and I introduced a very broad perspective of what we mean by sociology. Many things that are now discussed, we used to have specific sort of issues that we addressed in sociology, and then they started opening up to the economic system, sociology of work, sociology of representation in the public sphere, sociology and sexuality, as I said, sociology of war and peace. Sociology of war is now on the top of the agenda in some sociology departments and in some studies. And then we have the global civil society, so the sociology of globalization. And hence, the more sociology in itself, in modern terms, is widened, the more we need to stretch our understanding as well to seeing the different issues. And one of the issues that I think are very important, and especially for the Muslim world, because we are on the map of wars, is the sociology of war. And I was supervising like an encyclopedic entry by one of the young researchers, and we were discussing the notion of war. And most of what we found is basically the theory of jihad. accept fatwas that basically also address newly emerging problems, calling for the support of the Intifada in Palestine and trying to see how we can understand the Intifada in terms of our fiqh of jihad, looking at the different conflicts of Muslims and encouraging people to help and all the humanitarian work that is done, giving fatwas that there is an obligation to support these minorities that are subject to discrimination in Kashmir, the Uyghur, the Rohingya, and others. But there is no understanding, or very little understanding, that it's not anymore about the ecumen. It's not anymore about the geography, Darul Islam or geography of Islam, but it's also more now about war technology and different war strategies. And the sociology of war that includes also how are you going to talk about the legal aspect of it. It's a very interesting book that was published about war and terror. And it was addressing basically the aspects of, or the question that we also used to ask all the time our students in political theory and political thought, what is the difference between war and terror? Because if terror is actually practiced before the establishment of the state, and we have Charles Tilly, a very famous sociologist, who said that state making is basically organized crime. Till it's established, the state, it is considered to be organized crime or terror. Once they are in the seats of power, then they are a state, and then they have the legitimacy and everything is fine. So there are efforts now to try to pose the ethical questions on theories of war, but also look at the technology regarding use of drones, for example, etc. But not only from a fatwa perspective, but also from an Islamic sociology perspective. How can we guard civilizations in times of conflict and mass destruction? And this is something that can be linked also to sociology. What type of society do you want to preserve? How you can set very strict ethical sort of principles that can curb and control the use of force in such manner. And of course, the rise of mercenaries will pose even more questions, like we have Wagner and we have Blackwater and so on. So, and it's a sociological issue as much as it is political or international relations. So going through these aspects of starting from the Islamic sociology to the sociology of Islam, studying Islam historically, historical sociology. The work that comes to my mind is the work of Armando Salvatore and others. We also have historians who are very much interested in different dimensions, whether it's the legal aspect of Islam or the jihadi aspect of Islam. But from a historical fiqh perspective, some very good work has been done on that. But interestingly enough, some of the good work was not produced in our Islamic world. It was produced in Western academia, and I can list a number of references on that. So we also have to look at the sociology of Islam and the historical sociology of Islam as an ongoing ijtihad to understand what happened in our history and how different Islamic eras have different patterns of social interactions, including family. For example, the Shari'i course, the Sharia course, for example, al-Mahakim al-Shar'iyya that used to exist in North Africa, for example, they have very interesting documentation about the different situations and conditions of family at that time, the rights of women, what type of family problems were taken to the court, the importance of urf, the importance of the tribal structures and formations, etc. And this is also an aspect that needs to be explored. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, إِنَّ خَلَقْنَاكُم مِّن ذَكَرٍ وَأُنثَىٰ وَجَعَلْنَاكُمْ شُعُوبًا وَقَبَائِلَ لِتَعَارَفُوا, people sometimes when they used to say to read Qaba'il, they thought that this is a historical ayah, and it's talking about, how Qaba'il used to be at that time during the time of the revelation. But actually, tribalism has always been there, and it's coming back very strongly as well in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, and the new tribalism that is addressed in modern sociology, which is the bonding, but also the return of different traditions to be present in the public sphere and in social movements, religious traditions, not only the Islamic, but also the Christian, specifically the Orthodox Christianity, and of course, Judaism and politics and other issues. But we are somehow stuck in our own agenda. So once you are put in that agenda of study of Islamism, you start becoming defensive, and then you try to sort of modify and do the Islamization, but not in the pure and strong sense, strength of Izzah sense, yani, but in the sense of defense. Yeah, and trying to, yes, we have democracy and we have, everything can be compared to something that is more or less liberally. So I think that building on our understanding of Islamic sociology, but also being aware of the tradition of studying Islam and historical sociology of Islam in Western academia, and how it at the beginning was very much used for colonialism. But then we have critical voices and we have very good, interesting work that has been done, but that also needs to be framed by our own understanding of Islamic sociology. So bringing together this understanding of Islamic sociology based on the cosmic understanding and our position in this world in a post-anthropocentric world where humans are not as central as they used to be according to the literature of modern technology, where we will be competing with robots and artificial intelligence and algorithms, but also how to understand the sort of the aspect of globality of Islam, responding to different challenges in different parts of the world, and creating a sociology of Islam of the future. The futuristic aspect is also important. Ziauddin Sardar in the UK is one of those who started quite early talking about this, about the futuristic aspect of Islam, trying to explore post-normal times and the complexity and the uncertainties that we are going to face, which will not only affect our understanding of Islamic sociology, but also will affect the practical sociology of Islam, how new generations will understand religiosity, piety, values, morals, etc. And I think that it's not enough for the preachers to address people, asking them to practice their faith only, but also to understand how difficult it is in this world to be in the situation of يمسكون بالكتاب, holding to the book, as we say, with a very, very sophisticated and complex understanding of the challenges of Islamic sociology. Establishing a Muslim society is actually becoming more and more difficult because so many dimensions of Islamic ethics and Islamic Islamic social norms are very difficult to keep. Last but not least, I want to finish by saying that Islamic sociology and the sociology of Islam, both of them have been very much focusing on different forms of habitat. So we look at Mecca, we look at the Hijrah, and then we look at the city of the Prophet. The urban dimension here is very important, and it was called Yathrib was called the city of the Prophet. It was to be called Yathrib at the beginning, and then became the city of the Prophet. But the city of the Prophet was not a city of mulk. It was not, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say that Sayyidina Muhammad has mulk. He said he has hikmah and kitab and nubuwwah. So when he went to Mecca to open the center of what will become later, and the religious heart of what will become later, the Muslim Khilafah, he actually did not stay there. And Mecca was always under the control, and it was a subject of conflict between the different competing caliphs sometimes, but it was not the heart of the Islamic empire. Interesting. Mecca was the place that was so symbolic, but at the same time it was not the capital. And Medina was the example. And how we can approach the notion of urbanism and urbanity from an Islamic perspective. I also teach some courses on Islamic urbanism, and we address all the debate about the Islamic city. What is an Islamic city? And I think that our understanding of how to apply Islamic sociology in a world of the sociology of Islam that we need to understand with our tools through statistics, questionnaire, understanding policies, laws, customs, movements, etc., needs also to reinvent or readdress the issue of state. the spaces of secularism and post-secular ages and post-modern ages are actually spaces that there is a challenge in everyday life from a purely sociological perspective of use of the term of everyday life. There is a challenge in practicing Islam in everyday life because of the rising secularism and rising urbanism and rising economies of time and movement in the city day by day. And there are so many principles that need to be grasped and how they are essential to defend. And also you have to invest time and effort in keeping them. Like the family, for example, that it is witnessing liquidation because of many reasons, not that people are bad, but that there is a changing psychological speed of understanding social relations and notions of commitment, etc. Just to give an example, and this is why there are so many indicators that show that there is rising and skyrocketing actually percentage of divorce in the first 5 years in many Muslim countries. And this is leading to more and more individualization and social problems that will not make it easy for the society to keep its basic bond, upon which many other aspects of Islamic sociology can be basically established and enriched. And this spatial turn in understanding that some of the challenges of Islamic sociology, how to apply what we call Islamic sociology, but also relate to the sociology of Islam and its unfolding experiences, examples, something like what was, as I mentioned, was introduced by Salvatore, but also if someone wants to read The Venture of Islam by Hodgson, and how the Islam developed in history, of course, with a lot of issues that can be addressed to such efforts. But at the end of the day, there is a challenge that I think we should take into consideration. We used to divide, this is my last point, we used to divide the understanding into different schools of thought or different mazhabs. And I think that there is a need now for Muslims to try to make a dialogue amongst themselves. Because for a long time we have been busy trying to make dialogue with the West or with the East. And I'm very interested in that, but I think that a dialogue between Muslims that are now beyond their borders, historical borders. We have Muslim minorities in Western countries. We have different challenges that our Islamic societies are facing. There are examples for sustainable development in some countries that needs to be sort of discussed and developed, and maybe joint cooperation would be done. I mean, there are so many things that are related to what we call the social condition in the very wider sense that need to be discussed and addressed, and a lot of challenges. And I think that this is not the mission of one person. Books like the books of the ulama in earlier centuries. I found the book, by the way, very interesting by someone who was also in the 5th century. His name was Marzuki. And the title of the book is Al-Azminatu wal-Amkina. And I was very stunned. I mean, there are so many interesting aspects of looking into the dimensions of space and time in Islamic history that were not highlighted. And I think that some of these notions need to be looked into, and also how we can merge our heritage that we have, a lot of philosophical, fiqhi, shari'i roots for in Islamic sociology, but at the same time see the challenges that are we facing ahead. I will stop here for the discussion, and I hope that my words were not too ambiguous, and I hope that I made my point.